Hey, y'all. Welcome to MFP Live. I'm Donna Ladd, the founding editor of the Mississippi Free Press, and I am absolutely thrilled this week to be having a conversation with Heather McTeer Toney. Heather's a power woman, environmentalist, and so much more, and I am just so tickled to have you here, Heather. Welcome.
Thank you, Donna. It's great to be here with you.
Well, and so, we were kind of talking before the show. You have done so much that I kind of want you to tell people, tell folks what you're doing right now. And then I'm going to ask you some questions. We'll kind of go back and into your history a little bit, but just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I am currently the senior director for an amazing organization called Moms Clean Air Force. We are an affiliate of the Environmental Defense Fund, and we have a membership of over 1.2 million moms, dads, abuelas, tias, play cousins, you name it. Folks who are concerned about climate and the impact on children's health throughout the country. And I have been so excited to be doing that. I've been there since I left the Obama administration, where I served as regional administrator for EPA in the Southeast up until 2017. And then prior to that, one of my most exciting roles was mayor of Greenville, Mississippi, my hometown, where I was there for 2 terms. But Donna, I will tell you that all of that pales in comparison to my favorite title of mama. And I'm the mother of 2 kids at home and one who is grown and off on his own. So it is wonderful.
Wow. And so, something we've never talked about, but I'm kind of curious. Okay, first of all, you were the first Black woman mayor or Black mayor of Greenville?
Black mayor, period. The first African American, then the first woman, and the youngest. So just put all the things in there.
And you were like 27, is that right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And you served 2 terms.
Yes.
Right. Well, so tell me. So it sounds like you kind of started out in politics. I know you went to Spelman, right? Mm-hmm. And then you got your law degree from Tulane, I believe.
Yes.
So you were attorney. So did you think you would from an early age, did you feel like you were kind of on a political path? Is that what led you to become mayor? Or run for mayor?
I would say I did everything except that. I come from a social justice household. My dad is Charles Victor McTeer, noted civil rights and just amazing attorney, if I do say so myself.
Yes.
Powerhouse, not just in the state of Mississippi, but throughout the entire country.
Right.
And my mom is a retired school teacher. So I came up in a space of social justice and activism. My brother and I can remember us going to a march in Indianola, Mississippi for Dr. Merritt when my dad was, he was advocating for him to become the first Black principal in Indianola public school district. And I remember being there for a march. So that type of activity has just been part of my life.
Right.
But it's interesting, when I left to go to Spelman, I would find myself trying to come away from what I knew, but it's one of those things that it's just in you. Mm-hmm. So I served as a legislative aide to Senator Donzella James in the Georgia State Legislative Caucus, working on environmental issues. Because she had a ton of bills that she was working on. I clerked for a little while I was in law school with Judge Fred Banks in the Mississippi Supreme Court when he was on the Supreme Court.
Yes.
It was another wonderful opportunity. And I found myself coming back to what I knew. And that was seeing that people were treated equally, that they understood policy and how it impacted them. And I couldn't escape it, couldn't get away from it. And ended up back where I know my heart was and where God wanted me to be. And that was serving people. And I did that in political office.
Well, so was it when you worked in the Georgia political office that you became interested in environmentalism, or had that happened already?
I that's a great question, Donna. And I wrote a little bit about this because I found that I was doing environmental work and didn't realize it. And I think there are a lot of us that do environmental work every single day and don't realize that's what we're doing. There's so many stigmas that have been attached to climate action, climate change, environmentalism,
Mhm.
that I did a piece once just talking about what does an environmentalist look like? And the fact that if you do a Google search right now for what an environmentalist looks like, you're going to come up with pictures of white people hugging trees and just sort of singularity. And that's not what I knew. So I discovered later in my career, and really when I was mayor of Greenville, that I had been doing this environmental work the entire time. And that people of color and poor people are impacted by environmental injustices that impact poverty, they impact how we work, where we live, and we had not connected those dots. So it really became a passion of mine to try to correct some of the underlying issues of environmental injustice, while at the same time looking at how we provide jobs in communities, how we breathe better, and how we protect our children in the future. So I say it really kicked off when I was in Greenville.
Well, and then that makes me wonder, was there a particular situation that really got your attention there? I have
Groundwater in Greenville, Mississippi.
I had a feeling there was something.
And it's funny because anybody who lives in the Mississippi Delta, anybody in Greenville will tell you, Greenville, as a Greenville native, I can say this, maybe other people won't, but there's some folks who think that water is medicinal, like it has special qualities, special power, because it is soft, it's wonderful. I lived, bathed, drank the water for years, still do when I go home. But not the best thing when you're trying to attract tourism to areas. Nobody's going to want to go to a restaurant and be given a glass of water and it's brown. So just the basic aesthetics really got me into looking at how do we improve this while protecting the quality of our water, protecting what people love about the community, and encouraging economic development. I think the research in that space landed us on the front page of the Washington Post. We got the attention of EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. At the same time, there was a lot of work that I was researching and trying to do to improve infrastructure, wastewater systems, streets, just really shoring up the foundations of the community so that it could be built upon. And that's when Lisa Jackson, who was the first Black administrator for EPA, she had just started, and she started a tour across the country, and her first city to visit was Greenville, Mississippi. And so we had a wonderful visit. There was lots of press, of course, but she sort of pulled me to the side and she said, you're doing environmental justice work, right? And it's like, no, I'm just trying to make sure that we got good streets in the city and people have clean water to drink. She's like, well, that's really what environmental justice is. It's ensuring that there's equity, and that when you're talking about things like clean water and you're talking about infrastructure, that people have the same access that they would if they were in a rich community. So it was environmental work. And that's when the light bulb sort of really went off, that we had been missing a ton of opportunity in the area of environmental justice, just in doing infrastructure work in community. And it wasn't just my communities, it was communities that looked like Greenville, Black and brown communities that were below the poverty line in Mississippi, but also Alabama and Louisiana, and the different things that they were having to, I'd say, factor in. The Mississippi Delta is special because we're talking about environmental injustices, but we have a huge agriculture environment. Farming, water is critically important to our economic development. So these are things that we have to talk about how they intersect, and at the same time, how they can help us to really push our communities forward and innovation into the future. And that's really what excited me. I love the industry. Even when I went on to be the regional administrator at EPA, it's something about communities and understanding the intersection between air, land, water, people, and how we can use that for the betterment of our communities. It is truly an exciting and what I think is really the issue of our time.
Me too. And then part of what I was thinking about, getting ready for this interview was, I guess, how do you bridge the gaps there? I mean, I feel like, and I don't just mean it with this question, I don't just mean like between Black environmentalists and white environmentalists. I mean more like, I grew up in Neshoba County, fairly poor environment. Around me, but nobody, I think it would have been hard to get people to think about environmental issues around me, because they were busy trying to go to the factory and make a living and do all these other things. And I would guess that can be part of the challenge just in general, is how do you get people to be concerned or to think about the environment or environmental justice in the communities that you serve. And so I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, because we think and talk about it all the time, but we speak Southern. Mm-hmm. And that means it may not use the same terminology as someone who is in California or in New York or in the upper Midwest. We're talking about the same thing. So in that example that you gave, Donna, you may not have heard anybody talking about environmental issues, but I'm willing to bet you had folks talking about deer and duck season.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I could absolutely tell you how things have changed over the past 5 to 10 years, whether the seasons have shifted in terms of when the official season starts, what the atmosphere is like when they're going out, even to the tune of what animals are doing in the environment. Mm-hmm. It speaks to us differently, and we talk about it differently, but we're still talking about it. I've heard from hunters, just like I've heard from farmers, that the seasons are different. Their crops come up different. Pesticides, vector-borne diseases, that's the insects. Folks talk about mosquitoes still being up and active. All of these things are climate related, every last one of them. And so it's not that we don't talk about environmental issues or that we're not concerned about them. I think the opposite is actually correct. We are. Mm-hmm. We just talk about it differently.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's super interesting. And so now talk a little bit, because I saw, you're talking about we speak Southern, and I'd seen seen some of the stuff that you've written in that respect, but also where you're kind of calling for other people who, I guess calling for, addressing how you kind of have an intersectional environmental group. How do you get people to listen to people who are speaking Southern about environmentalism? How do you bridge those gaps?
So in two ways. One, there has to be a realization, really a reckoning of where we are with respect to climate. I hate to say climate change, because the climate has changed, right? We're dealing in a climate crisis at this point. No one's going to argue that we are seeing stronger storms that are coming into, that are impacting our cities and towns. I can remember when remember Hurricane Katrina was so awful. It was so horrible. We were looking at these pictures. We were preparing our cities in Mississippi to take in folks that were running from the hurricane. And Hurricane Katrina was the pinnacle of what we thought was the worst. And when I think back to 2020's hurricane season and the fact that we had even gotten into the Greek alphabet, within the past 10 years, just how much that has shifted. Mm-hmm. So, the idea that climate is changing is not a debatable subject. It is impacting us. And I think folks, we do have to have a very real conversation about impact versus what we think is theory. And that conversation transcends different groups when we relate it to things that we can experience with our 5 physical senses. So we can talk about the floods that ravaged the South Delta and people who died as a result of that. That's very real to us. We can talk about the prices of food that has gone up, because that's very real to us, and that's impacted by the storms that have come in and the fact that farmers can't get stuff out of the field. We know from real experience in Mississippi of what that backup is on the Mississippi River. When the farmers up in Iowa and in the Midwest belt that feed into the Mississippi River, when that river is swollen and they can't get their goods out, and we can't get them out to the coast. Our Corps of Engineers, our farmers, our economic development folks, they know that, they feel that. So these are spaces that we can find commonality with other parts of the country and with other organizations to begin to show similarities in our experiences. We experience economic despair the same way that the folks in California experience when they have wildfires. The same way that the people in the upper Midwest right now, the upper Northeast right now are experiencing with these extreme snowstorms. We know what it feels like when all the power is out because of a storm and a hurricane. They're feeling it right now because of a snowstorm. I think as we talk about our commonalities, we can then begin to bridge some of these gaps and realize we're talking about the same experiences. So now let's talk about solutions that will help all of us to prepare ourselves from being more, to be more resilient. And I think that's a really good conversation, Donna, we can have, because that's talking about how to build economy. That's physically talking about how to put in streets and bridges that protect us from higher, stronger storms. That's putting people to work, resiliency. It's strengthening a community, right? Those are things that we can talk about and that people want. And all of these have to do with climate action. They include our city governments, they include our states, and it can be nonpartisan. It is nonpartisan. It's one of the things I love about Mom's Clean Air Force. We say all the time, we're mom-partisan. And, it means we're looking at things that help the entire community. I'm really excited that now there's a better and a stronger sense of making sure that we do this in a very equitable fashion. And I think that's been missing for quite some time.
Well, and we're kind of sitting here, well, we're on the precipice of a lot here, but as you say, the climate has changed. It's kind of this, we have an opportunity, I think, as a state and a nation to start having deeper conversations about it. And like you say, to get to the solutions point, the Biden administration is, they're planning a domestic climate. They have both, right? They have what is John Kerry doing? He's
international climate, and then Gina McCarthy is going to be the domestic climate person. So there's domestic climate policy and international climate policy, and both of these are important. And we're talking about Mississippi here for a moment, but both of these are important to how we will be operating in our state. We do international trade here. Our farmers rely on some international trade, and we have to understand that international policy, even on climate, is something that impacts the economy in our home state. And it can be done and will be done. I'm really excited that John Kerry is in that spot because he gets that. He understands that intersection and the fact that it means for small businesses, it means for our agricultural community, giving an opportunity to really engage on an international level that puts more money in pockets of folks, that are our friends and neighbors. And I think that's really, again, an important thing to understand.
What would be an example of something like, make it real for people, like on an international level, something that might be a solution or might happen that would then benefit people right here in Mississippi financially?
Well, I can give you one that we all lived through. If you remember when there was a huge problem with catfish, catfish farmers, and what was happening overseas, and now deceased Thad Cochran, who was a senator at the time, really leading the charge and effort to be engaged, but talking about the importance of protecting Mississippi farmers in that catfish industry. Having somebody that can be the advocate for us in that space is so important when you're talking about even climate issues, because unlike that time period when I don't think we were talking about climate in the same way, we have to still realize that different countries have different requirements, of course, on even what their climate policy is. So I think climate and environment, again, they go together. You talk about not just what we think in terms of air and extreme weather, but chemicals that are in food, toxins, and different countries have different rules and regulations regarding that. That all comes together when you're talking about environmentalism and climate. So it's really important to have someone like John Kerry, who's at the helm, who has not only that international experience, but understands those economic factors and how they impact businesses in our country.
Right, because it's so often gets just, the partisan version of this kind of so often just gets divided into, if you support business, you have to not believe that climate change is a real thing, but that you have to be anti any kinds of regulation or whatever. It's just, well, first of all, it's not a very smart way to divide it, but I guess what I'm asking you, what's, I guess on top of what you've already said, because I know we're addressing this a lot, but I mean, what would you do? I mean, to try to say to people, to get them to have this conversation, to be in the same room as we go forward, and to really start to come together, in ways that maybe we've never done completely over whatever these proposals are going to be going forward, to get real serious about them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, because we have to make things very real for people in community. I think that is key. Yeah. Community is such a big key. Over the past 4 years, community has been really left out of the process. The process for regulatory actions is one that is supposed to be transparent and open, so that everybody can come to the table and understand very clearly what is being regulated, what is taking place, what are the protections, and what are the costs, right? And you have the opportunity to ask all those questions. And Donna, I mean, down to the detail, how much is this going to cost me? How much will this cost my health care? And these are questions that they assess. This is why it's so important to have really good, sound science at the root of environmental regulations, but also, just as we're talking about climate impacts, environmental impacts across our country. Pollution costs, pollution kills. I don't know if you saw here recently, I think it was just yesterday, the day before yesterday, in the UK, they found, for the first time anywhere in the world, air pollution was added to a death certificate as a cause of death. It's profound. It's profound, because air pollution is something that causes chronic disease. We know this to be fact. It's come from science, it's come from doctors. And I think if you go into any hospital, and right now, while we're in the midst of coronavirus that is rampant across our country, when you look at chronic diseases, people who have asthma, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, the things that we also know are attributed to pollution, those death rates skyrocket. So let me break it down. If you are poor, if you are African American or a person of color, if you live in a place that is surrounded by polluted environments, so think Port Arthur, Texas, or Houston, or oil refineries, and you have any of these chronic diseases, you are more likely to die than someone else. And that in and of itself shows you the inequality of things like air pollution in our country, things like water pollution in our country. And it's the reason why we have to have community conversations, so people know that they have access to come in and ask these questions about regulations. You're right. People think regulation business, and it has become so partisan that folks tend to believe that if we are deregulating, which means we are taking away the regulations, then we are freeing the businesses to make more money that will benefit all of us. And then there are others who feel like if we just keep regulating and regulating and regulating, then we're getting a grip on the businesses and they have to do whatever it is we say. You've got two opposite ends. Donna, let me tell you a secret. Realistically, the businesses, they know full well what the science says. They know what they have to and should comply with. And just like my 4-year-old, who is not going to eat the vegetables on his plate unless it's not that he didn't, not that he doesn't No, he has to do it, but they go a lot quicker if I'm standing there. And that often is the case with some of the guidance that's put in place to protect us. The guidance is there to protect people. And even some of the guidance is there to protect people. You have some industries that are ahead of the game. They're already putting these things in place, so they don't mind the guidance there. A great example of that is the mercury and air toxic standards, or what we call MATS for short. So this last administration, the Trump administration, changed that. They what we call rolled it back and said you don't need that much regulation. Donna, I testified before Congress on this, and it was baffling to me that not only were we still having to have a conversation about regulating mercury, and for those who don't know, mercury is one of the toxins that will impact an unborn baby's brain. So this is like something that the right and the left, we could all agree on. We want to protect fetuses in the womb. I agree with that. They agree with that. We're all in the same place, protect the babies. I was baffled at the fact that we were still having to have this conversation about protecting unborn babies from poison. And on top of that, that the industries themselves had written a letter to the administration saying, you know what, you don't have to bother this one. There are other regulations we can talk about, but this one's okay.
Leave this one alone.
Leave this one alone. We're good. We're good with this one. And they still rolled it back. So that's the type of thing that's just like, okay, clearly that is something that is financially feasible for only a few people. But when you've got community, you've got folks on the left and the right. I mean, that was one of the few things that we actually had a joint letter from a Republican senator and a Democratic senator. There was support on both sides of the aisle. You had the industry themselves saying, we don't need you to roll that back. And that it still happened. So when you think about things like that, we know that, there are places where we come together on what's right. It does exist. And I'm looking forward to a new administration where, the common sense of this is now back, and we can get to protecting families the way that we should, with science and keeping health in mind.
Right. Well, and not just to regulate for regulation's sake. I mean, like, even in that case, I was thinking, well, I've known conservatives who would say back at that point, well, then if they already know it, you don't need the regulation. But it strikes me that there are always going to be some who, if it's cheaper, if they don't have to do something, you'll have violators of it, even if it's like a self-regulation, I mean, that isn't right.
Well, and you got to think about it, even for those people who were saying, well, if the businesses are doing it, why you really don't need it? Think about it from the businesses side, sort of play devil's advocate. You had some of the businesses that were saying, no, this is our good news story. This is for us saying, hey, here's regulation that we've complied with, and we're being a great neighbor. Like, you have some businesses that needed it to raise the flag of what they were doing right. Even in that respect, I think it's unwise to think of, well, let's just strip away the regulation because they're already doing it. No, you've got some businesses that are saying, we want this. We
want to market it. Right.
Yeah. It's marketable.
Right. And we're okay with it. And we want it that makes total sense. Well, and I think it feels like what you're saying there is kind of, it's like we can look at all of this through all the lenses. I mean, we can look at it through a business lens. We can look at it through job creation as we kind of reconfigure some of the ways we're doing things, economic development, and obviously safety. I mean, that's kind of at the core of it, that it can be, it always strikes me as the people who just want to be in denial the most, maybe they just don't care. I mean, it's the bizarrest thing. It's like, is it really okay for a certain number of people to get, to die or to put their children's lives on the line. I mean, none of that makes sense to me.
It's where we have to remind people to stay engaged,
Yeah.
This year, while we were all virtual, there were opportunities that we had, and moms, we certainly use these, but opportunities that agencies had to expand their audience of getting feedback, because more people are sitting in front of their computers. You don't have to travel to Washington, D.C. to make a comment or be a part of a hearing. Yet there were agencies that reduced the amount of time that people had to comment, effectively taking away that right. And in my opinion, using the cover of COVID and the racial injustice that's been taking place, the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, they use those things as cover to keep from having to do this comment period that they really needed to do. It's why we kept the pressure on them to say, no. We need 60 days to respond. Don't cut it back to 30 or cut it to 45. Keep it to what it's supposed to be, because it's that type of engagement of making people aware and making sure that they know that they can have that comment and that they should have that comment is what helps to, I say, corral that randomness that we saw with Mats. And even with Mats, that was a little pre-COVID and we were able to travel and we're on the Hill. Still, that accountability has to be kept up. But when people don't know they have the access and the ability to do it, that's what allows it to continue.
Well, we have a comment here that kind of seems that you're talking a little bit about the Biden administration and other things, but it's on the screen there. But Glenn Blackman wants to know what you can tell us about the new EPA administrator, who's a Southerner.
Yes.
Wasn't he just announced today?
Yes, he was just announced today. So very excited that Michael Regan is going to be the new EPA administrator. I am thrilled that there's a Southerner that's going to be in that space. Michael comes with a load of experience from working in the North Carolina DEQ. In fact, he was appointed to that position when I was at EPA Region 4. And then prior to that, he's worked at EDF, where I currently work, because Moms Clean Air Force is a affiliate of the Environmental Defense Fund. So we are really excited to have someone that we know listens to science, listens to environmental justice issues, and has good common sense. Michael has a family, he has kids, he understands that this is a job that impacts communities, and regulations impact communities. What I would say that's striking me outside of my excitement about the whole team, Gina was my former boss, so I'm thrilled about that. You got Michael, you've got the former mayor of Michigan, who's going to be over Department of Energy, who was certainly a big climate advocate. There is Brenda Mallory, who's going to be at CEQ, that's the Center for Environmental Quality. There's sort of this great cast of experts and knowledge that has been missing for quite some time. At the same time, these are people who get it. They get the community element. And I think they'll be pressing that forward. They're going to need all of our help. I have said from the beginning that climate action and environmental action is nothing that can be set in one place. We do all of ourselves a disservice if we fully expect EPA to handle all of the environmental stuff, because that's just not realistic. And I was really thrilled to hear about the way that it's going across the entire administration. Everybody's thinking about environment. And I think that's important. And I see another comment here.
Well, you were on some short lists now. I kept seeing your name pop up out there.
Yes.
So I was kind of a little bit bummed too, just in that respect, but I would know the person and work with. But yeah. So is there any particular Regan, right? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there any particular area that you would point to that's kind of that you would say is his particular expertise or baby or whatever you wanted to call it?
So I definitely don't want to speak for Michael and what his expertise is. I think he's going to have to set his own plate of what he's going to be focused on and how he wants to direct the agency. What I can say is I definitely think he has got his work cut out for him. You're right. I saw myself too a lot in those same articles and being a part of that short list of candidates, reckoning with the fact that this is a huge lift. This is a absolutely huge, tremendous lift. There is a ton of work that has to be done very, very quickly. And it will need the resources of not only the agency, but the support of the federal government. And we shouldn't take that lightly. Like, we shouldn't expect Michael to come in and walk on water on the first day. And let's just be realistic. We don't know what the Senate is going to look like. We don't know what is going to happen in terms of appropriations policy. What we do know is that we've got to make sure that the science is there. We have to make sure that we can immediately reckon with any rollbacks that we have the opportunity to fix very quickly. We've got to restore the integrity of the agency of EPA and really be ready to work very genuinely and authentically on environmental justice issues across the nation. So that is no easy lift. Nothing that should be taken lightly. And I truly appreciate all the people, all the support, all the folks who were like, Heather, we think that would be great. You can do that. That's wonderful. I'm going to support Michael as much as he needs me to support. I'm going to be whatever he...
Well, I would guess, and not to speak for you, but I would guess it would be like, that's an exciting opportunity, and it's a big opportunity, and it's a big job, and there are probably pros and cons in one's life about those kinds of things. So I could totally see that. Well, we talked already about, well, let me kind of make this, bring it home for me. It's like, I've been, the editor of another publication, the Jackson Free Press in Mississippi, for almost 20 years, right? 18 years, I think. And, I think when I look backward over that time, at least one of the areas that kind of pops to the top for me that I kind of regret, not in the sense of I'm not a regretter, but when I look back and say, what could we have done more in-depth coverage of? It's the environment, and it's environmental issues, it's environmental justice issues, environmental racism issues. And it's almost like, I think a lot of the reasons there's so many things on our plate in Mississippi, that you get busy, you got just all kinds of stuff, even here now and with the Mississippi Free Press, all kinds of things that, are coming at us very quickly that we need to do. But part of and I haven't mentioned this yet, but you are on the board of directors of the Mississippi Free Press, and which is wonderful. And one of the reasons, probably the main reason that I really wanted you to play that role is because I want us to do a different kind of journalism on environmentalism, right? It's like, what do we need to do? We've kind of had COVID-19, we've had, racist emails, we've had all kinds of other things that have kept us really busy. But going into next year, you're one of the people that I'm really going to be calling on to talk about what does it look like as we go around the state of Mississippi as journalists, or what should we be doing? When you give, I'm basically getting you to give me advice right here on the air, but what do you want to see more? What needs more attention around the state when it comes to environmental issues?
Yeah, no, I love it. And I love being a part of the MFP board, because this is the top journalism in the state of Mississippi, bar none, as far as I'm concerned. Just amazing investigative journalism. I think there's a lot of history around environmental racism in our state that we are still feeling the impacts of. There are current issues, of course, that have been taking place. Like, I remember even when I was at Region 4, coming back home to the Gulf Coast to talk about Turkey Creek down in the Gulfport, Biloxi area as a major environmental issue that impacts a community of color. But there's such history here around environmental issues with chemicals and with agriculture that nobody really wants to talk about. I know a lot of folks who know or can tell stories of their family members that were row markers, Black men who stood in the middle of rows when crop dusters came over. They were the flag men, right? They were the ones that let the crop dusters know what row they were on as they were spraying chemicals in these spaces. That's an environmental issue. That's environmental history. And there's a lot of there's a lot there. I'm actually in the process of writing right now, Donna. I know you and I have talked about this a lot because I do write a lot. I write for different magazines and publications.
We've run a couple of your pieces.
Right.
And they had appeared in Dame magazine, our friends there.
Yes. Yeah. And so I enjoy writing. And I took a little break, but I'm going to definitely get back into writing. But I'm actually doing a book now. So I'm in that process. I'm thrilled about it. And don't ask me the title because it doesn't have one yet. It just has it's good. It's happening. And I'm really excited. But, in that process, I found myself even studying and talking about climate and the slave trade, like even our history of climate action in coming to this country as enslaved people and what that has meant for us in the South. So there's a lot of history that is racism in our state and across our country that is connected to environmentalism that I think we haven't delved into. And that's one example with the flag men that I was researching and talking about a little bit in the book. And then, Turkey Creek, I know you've covered a little bit of it. I think across there's some good things too that have happened. The state of Mississippi worked with EPA and Region 4 to help clean up some spaces. I think Mississippi Phosphates is definitely one that we counted as a success of a place that was cleaned up with funding that came from the state of Mississippi and from EPA while I was over at Region 4. So, cleaning up some of these places that we live and that are historical and are important to us is just as important as making sure that we don't have environmental injustices moving forward.
Right. Well, and exactly. And I think, the journalism that we're trying to do it's solutions journalism ultimately. And this, but I'm kind of putting it out for everybody. It's solutions journalism, but you really can't report intelligently about solutions until you understand how things got that way.
Right.
And so that's kind of where we marry up, just kind of as a matter of course, as people really probably know about us by now. But we're marrying up that history with potential solutions for the future. Like how did the inequities come about, or certain this is a good example of a piece that I really want to do. And Ariel Hudson, who is on our advisory board, is from Tunica, right? And I was in Tunica and learned about Sugar Ditch. And anybody watching this who don't know what I'm talking about, you should Google it. Just look it up, because it was this sewer ditch, right in the middle of the Black community for years, and so she's off being a Rhodes Scholar in the other Oxford right now, but that's something that she really wants to write about for us at some point, and kind of just the whole saga around finally that getting cleaned up. Right, you can see it's on the civil rights site here, and but here's the thing about that I would say is that my guess is probably at least some of the people watching this, maybe all, didn't know about that. Certainly not if they're not from Tunica.
Yeah, or if they don't listen to blues music and didn't realize what they were listening to.
Didn't know what it was, right? And so those are the kinds of things that we're going to be diving into. you know, really kind of pulling in and obviously drawing on your expertise and others, but then also asking that question, well, what kind of effect, you know, even economically, did those kinds of inequities have on certain communities, to help people kind of understand, you know, where problems came from, kind of on the way to solving them, right?
Yes. And I think that's a great point to investigate, because it's very similar to stories and investigations in history that we've done with respect to education, and how our education system in some communities is far under par those in other communities that are predominantly white or have a higher tax base.
Right.
So in that same way, we can talk about environmentalism. We can talk about the lack of infrastructure. You know, believe it or not, wastewater treatment plants and drinking water, Safe Drinking Water Act, all of these things fall within environmentalism. They fall within regulation. But, you know, hey, Don, I've been a mayor, and I definitely understand the plight of community leaders and city council leaders when they have to keep up with regulations, but they don't have the money because they don't have the tax base that puts them in a position to keep up with upgrades that are necessary for the health and welfare of their community. It's a being between a rock and a hard place. And so part of telling this story, part of the investigative journalism that I know I certainly appreciate with Mississippi Free Press, is it gets these stories out. It talks about how these communities have gotten to this place and puts it in a space where it has attention and can draw the attention of national leaders and of industries that are looking, industries, but maybe not NGOs, not nonprofit organizations that are willing to help.
All right.
So, you know, when I was mayor, it was this storytelling process that caught the attention of the Clinton Global Institute. You know, it's how I ended up on a stage with Bill Clinton talking about water. It's through the telling of these stories of what's happening within our communities. And these community leaders need that platform. They need to be able to tell the story of the lady who lives at the corner of the street, and every time it rains, she can't flush her toilet. Right. They've got to be able to have a platform to talk about the fact that their schools get shut down because of a water test that's come back negative, or there was lead that was found somewhere, and that impacts the education of an entire community. Like, we have to talk about these stories and elevate them to a place so that people can get to get it, but also recognize how this impacts a community, the future of that community, but at the same time, how we can come up with solutions that make that community resilient and can leverage infrastructure dollars to building a stronger future economy for communities. It has been done. So I don't want to, you know, couch this as some futuristic thing, some great idea. No, it's been done. It's done in communities. It's been done in a community in South Carolina. If you think about the Regenesis Project with a great friend of mine and a superb elected official, Harold Mitchell. He's retired now I think he's retired, semi-retired, but the great work that he did with the Regenesis Project, I mean, it's nationally known because it shows how you can leverage dollars to regenerate a community. Even in Latino communities, our brown brothers and sisters are doing this same work in New Mexico and Arizona. And I find joy at the fact that I can sit right here in my office in Mississippi and communicate and talk and collaborate with these entities and these organizations that have such innovation all across this country, from, you know, Washington State all the way to New Hampshire to Selma, Alabama. It's beautiful that there's a lot of collaboration and things that we can learn from. And I think that's what it's going to take.
Well, and when you were talking, I was thinking about, it's kind of, even, you know, I'm a journalist, so I look at it from this lens, but, you know, it's one thing and it's good. Like, if you as a journalist go and expose someone with a water problem of some sort, and then, we shined a spotlight on that, so they're going to fix that problem. You know, we had that with the Jackson Free Press. There was a couple with the sewage issues, and we pounded on it and they fixed their sewage issues. But it's another, if the approach or transformative solutions that then can then, whether the journalism or community work or collaborations, right? So that you are actually, while you're fixing things, you're building something new for the future, and you're building jobs, and you're improving the economic development. And I think that's and that's part of what I'm so impressed with you over. It's like this mixture of having run a city that has had challenges and has suffered from tax base erosion, I know, and some other issues. It's like from running a city and understanding the problems of the local officials, kind of then mixed in with how does that bump into regulations? How do we all work together to have those kind of conversations? And then for journalism, how do we report on who's doing it right? So that we can all be inspired about that. And so that's a way to change things, right? It's to change it for the future. And I'm kind of hoping that's, that this nation can figure out how to come together over, looking at climate change, not as a partisan weapon, but, to really look at the future,
Well, we're not going to have too much of a choice.
Right.
Whether folks believe it or not, it's like my mom would say, just because you don't believe in God doesn't mean God doesn't believe in you. And I'm sure the thing is out there. Just because you don't believe just because you don't believe in climate change doesn't mean it's not happening. Doesn't mean it's not existing. So, according to the science, according to the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, these are the world, not the United States, the world's top climate scientists who come together on a regular basis to give us an update on where we are, what needs to be done, and how far the planet is into an unchanging climate. So according to the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, we've roughly got about another 8 to 10 years to make some significant change in reducing our carbon emissions. That means the pollution that goes into the air, before we're at a place of irreversible change. So I equate that to be, before my kid turns 14, before my daughter gets out of college.
And that's kind of a good way to think about it, right there,
I know,
right?
I know. It's sort of like, okay, whoa, we're not necessarily working on something where we don't know. We've got to make some decisions pretty quickly. And I heard the best quote. This is my quote of 2020, Donna. It came from a mom in Montana when she was doing her meetings on the Hill. She said, "There is no vaccine for climate change." And I was like, I got it on a t-shirt. It's already been printed. So don't try to
saw it somewhere. It must have been in your stuff. Yeah. There's no vaccine for climate
right.
change,
We already printed it out. So we already got that one.
Brilliant. Well, it's brilliant because
it's absolutely, so it's true. It's not like this is something that we can just snap our fingers and fix. This is a collaborative effort for everyone. And if there was anything that I would say to people who are interested, concerned, don't know whether they're in and out, read, ask the questions, have the conversations. Don't let this be one of those things that we don't talk about over Christmas dinner because you think we're going to get into a fight about it.
Right.
No, let's talk about it. Let's keep it in the conversation and in the mix, because that's how we learn. That's how we engage. And it's one of those things that, again, we can continue to talk. We can continue to talk very fluidly about this. And I know we're coming to close to the end of time, and there was some stuff that one thing I did want to sort of jump into is specifically like how women in our state can be very successful in what we do, how we're held up on some of the things that sometimes we're trying to do. I would say never be afraid, ever, to get out and do what it is that you're passionate about. Right. So much of our talent is suppressed because of fear of what someone's going to say, fear of whether or not we can get a job, fear of whether or not we're going to make any money. I am living witness to doing what you're passionate about. Your gift will make room for you, especially not in spite of the fact that you're from Mississippi, but because of the fact that you're from Mississippi.
It
gives you so much levity to do so many things. I cannot tell you how I have traveled the world and spoken across the world because I'm from Mississippi. So, and I'm a woman from Mississippi, and Black woman from Mississippi. So that is my message. Please don't ever be afraid. I think the success is so tied to being fearless and to just going for it, no matter what.
Well, and I'm glad you came back to that, because I was going to try to get you back there real quick before we end. But and I would add to that, because, you know, I agree with you completely, and join with other women. You know, look for women who are doing, you know, who are positive and believe in the possibility and believe in transformation. I mean, that's what we're doing with, you know, we're women founded, women run. I mean, we have, frankly, one man on our board of directors and all you fabulous women. And then we have a number of men on our advisory board. But my point is, we're believing that we can create new tables if we have to.
Absolutely.
We're creating new networks, and we're coming together to even what we're talking about here. You know, I need your expertise to help us do a new kind of environmental journalism in the state. And that's just what I need, but we can all get together and do that. We have to believe in each other, I think, right?
We absolutely do. We have to believe in one another. We have to support one another. Mm-hmm. We have to change the frame of what the success looks like and get out of the stereotypes, you know?
That's right.
I think that's so important. It's just a stereotype of what success and a powerful woman looks like. I have an amazingly supportive husband at home. I have kids at home. I do come and I cook and clean and do all this stuff. I travel and I speak and I write. I am not Superwoman, right? And I am the first to say it is so important to rely on and to help other people the same way that I receive help. It is critical that if we are to be successful in our state and as proud Mississippian, proud Mississippi Deltan, that we get past the fear, you know? Step outside of it. There's a whole world that's waiting for all of the brilliance and intelligence that we bring just because we have the grace of being born Southern.
I love that. Now, well, I think we'll probably end it on that note, the grace to be born Southern. And I'm with you, and you know that. And to everybody out there, thank you for joining us again for MFP Live. You can watch the past episodes, you know, after the fact, tell other people, share them. Right now I'm doing them about every 2 weeks or so. We may increase it in the future. The next, I'm tickled to announce our next guest that we haven't put out there yet, but since we've started the Mississippi Free Press, which a lot of people know is named after a civil rights era newspaper out of Jackson called the Mississippi Free Press, very daring, done by a multiracial group of people. The longest running editor of that got in touch with me fairly recently, Charlie Butts. And he and I just had a delightful conversation this week on Zoom. I think he's in Ohio. So he's going to be the guest of that episode. I know. And he has some stories, y'all, about the 60s and being a civil rights worker who ended up running this newspaper here. It's just amazing. And so that one's going to be on January 7th for our next one at 5 p.m. So our next official one, we may stick something else in there. So hopefully everybody out there will join us again. Also, please remember that the Mississippi Free Press is in the middle of our news match campaign at the end of our fundraising campaign. And that has gone very well right now. Since November 1st, every dollar is going to doing more journalism. The Wise Women of Oxford, where I believe Heather lives, has been doubling the current donations. So if you could see on the screen, if you go there, we welcome any amount, any amount that you can give, because that is all helping us grow our staff and do more, and that'll help us with our environmental journalism, in fact, in 2021. And we so appreciate everybody who's donated and supported us and left comments and all those other things. It's amazing that we just started in March, but we're riding high right now. So
I think that speaks to your leadership, Donna. We would not be riding high without your vision. So thank you for being such a visionary in this state.
Yep. And y'all pay attention to what Heather's doing. She's doing big things out there now. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.